So this is just kind of the historical background of the Anglo-Saxon period. I put a bunch of notes up on the D2L website, and I put a couple other things up tonight, or at least one tonight, because somebody, Gregory, asked me about typing Old English. Okay, so I put up a link to a page that gives you instructions on how to type Old English characters on Windows machine or a Mac machine. Okay,
Thank you. Yes.
should be very useful. Okay, so dates. Let's actually start before 55 BC, okay? Because this is just when Julius Caesar invades. Let's go back to roughly, very roughly, 6000 BC.
Okay, so in terms of the little timeline I created here, do I need to put 6000 BC somewhere on here?
Yeah, I probably would.
Okay.
Whenever you copy stuff down from the board that I put up, make sure you leave space. Because I'll fill in, or I'll try to fill in. So, roughly 6000 BC, you've got a small group of people. You've got a small group of people who are living. And I'm going to try and do this quickly. I really am not going to try to get us all bogged down in the English language. I am going to go way back, though. To... Stop.
Just click the wheel. The wheel.
Yeah,
You need to like tap it to get it off of what it's doing. Oh, you clicked it again.
Yeah, because I had to go back up to where I want. Let's see, right. Yeah, because this is garbage.
I believe.
Okay, so, sorry, 6,000 years ago, not 6,000 BC. Indo-Europeans. Who are they? We don't know. But they're a group of people, probably not real large, who live in this general area, north of the Caucasus Mountains, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Okay? They might go back 6,000 BC, okay? In fact, they probably do. So if you have that date right now, you could probably keep it. What we know is that beginning sometime around 4,000 BC. Could be 4,500, could be 3,500, okay? For some reason, they start to move. That is, this small band of people starts to expand, starts to spread out. Okay? And there are a couple of different hypotheses about who the Indo-Europeans were, what was their original homeland, that kind of thing. I'm going to only basically talk about one because it's the one that's most commonly accepted. Okay? As with all science, there is no real consensus. You know, it's the whole basis of science is you keep testing, you keep trying, okay? So this is a theory that was kind of first proposed in the late 1950s, and there's archaeological evidence to support it. There's what's called paleolinguistic evidence to support it. There's mythological evidence to support this essential hypothesis, okay? Out of this group of people, the Indo-Europeans, come all the languages, for example, of Russia. Okay? The languages of India, Hindi, Bengali, Sanskrit, the Prakrits, etc. Okay? All the Germanic languages, all the Celtic languages, all the Italic languages, all the Greek languages, and when you you say all the Italic, therefore then also all the Romance languages that descend from them. Okay. What it doesn't include is Finland, because Finnish is not an Indo-European language. It doesn't include the language of Hungary, because Hungarian is not Indo-European. It doesn't include the language of the Basques, because we don't know what language the Basques is. Literally. It doesn't fit into any quote-unquote linguistic family. There are some scholars who think it might descend from the language of the Neanderthals. We don't know. It doesn't fit, which is probably why the Basques kind of don't fit. Are they French or are they Spanish? The French don't want them. The Spanish don't want them. So, they're trying to fight for their own homeland, etc. Okay? So, they start to migrate. And what this is showing is, this little bit of migration beginning over into the Balkans. Okay? And then the next map shows starting to go up into northeastern Europe, over into Russia, okay, into, the Balkans here, into the Baltics up here in northern Germany. Now, this kind of helps explain, I mentioned last week, Germanic and the Slavic languages share one interesting trait. They have the dative plural that ends in Okay? This kind of helps explain that. All right? And then it starts to spread around, and you get people coming down in this area. You get people way over here. Actually, it's not included, but it'd be like here, in Mongolia. There's an Indo-European group that ended up in Mongolia. We have Buddhist texts translated into this language. Okay, so it lasts until 700 AD or so. It's called Tocharian A and B, two different versions of the same language. The interesting thing about the Tocharians, this will blow your mind if you've never read it. Get a book or watch I think it might be even on YouTube now, called The Mummies of Urumqi. Urumchi. About these mummies discovered in the Gobi Desert. Okay? Tall, and they don't look Oriental at all. In fact, some of the mummies have clothing on them. Okay? One of them is referred to as something like the Urumqi Queen. She has red hair, tattoos, and is wearing tartan. She looks like a Scot or an Irish woman. Okay? And yet she's way over here, and her remains have been dated, if I remember correctly, to something like 1800 BC. Okay? Tocharian, the language, is closer to Germanic, of which Scottish is a descendant, okay, is closer to Germanic than it is to any of the Iranian languages, or the Persian languages, or the Indian languages. It's what's called a Kintun language because of its word for 100. So it kind of belongs on this side of the map, and these other kind of languages kind of belong over here. Okay? Why am I beginning back here? Because this is the beginning of the Germanic languages. Indo-European. Okay? Germanic languages are Indo-European. Greek is Indo-European. Italian is Indo-European, and all of its derivatives. Okay? The Slavic languages, all of them are Indo-European. So Russian, Ukrainian, okay, Czech, Croatian, Serbian, all Indo-European, right?
But not Finnish.
But not Finnish. Finnish is part of a group called Finno-Ugric. Finnish, the Ugric is Hungarian. We have no idea why.
Are they similar? Were they grouped together? For
The Finnish and Hungarian, yes.
So
Yes,
the
there is a
structure-
relation.
Okay.
We don't know what the relation is. It's probably siblings. They arise from parent language, which is now lost. Okay. Okay, so let me skip through all this. This is Grimm's Law, which we don't need to go into. So here you have the Lord's Prayer in a variety of Germanic languages. Okay. Gothic is the oldest surviving Germanic language there is. Catherine, have you not been able to get on to D2L?
Forgive me, I didn't get on there
Okay,
this week, but
because I can email these to you.
thanks to Gregory's help.
Okay, because I can email these to you if you need them. Gothic is the oldest surviving Germanic language. The last Gothic speaker, living speaker of Gothic, died in 1710. Okay, this isn't Gothic, you know, dressed in black and
Listens to the Cure.
yeah. This is Gothic. The Balkans area, okay, is where they originated. And we have written text in the 4th century AD. We've got portions of the Bible because there was a Gothic bishop by the name of Ulfilas or Wulfilas. His name just means the wolf, okay, who translated portions of the Bible into Gothic. He translated peaceful portions of the Bible into Gothic because the Goths were already violent warriors, and he was trying to pacify them a little bit. Okay? We also have Gothic texts that survive in runic inscriptions. Okay? But there's probably not a German language per se prior to 800 BC. That is 800 BC. In 1000 BC, there's probably nobody speaking Proto-Germanic. Okay, it hasn't fully developed by this time. All right, so we have Gothic 4th century, Old Saxon 840 AD, Old English 9th century. So you could say, if you wanted to, 840. I mean, this is later than 840, but it's in the 800s. Okay. Old Saxon is different than Old English for a couple of reasons. Old English is a development of a mixing of Saxon and Anglian. Okay. This post-dates. We're going to talk about the dates over there in a moment. When the Anglo-Saxons and the Jews come over to the island of Britain in 450 AD, they're bringing their languages with them. Okay? That version of Saxon is 400 years older than this one. So it would be old Saxon, if you want. Okay? So then you have Old English, 9th century AD, roughly. This would be King Alfred's version. Okay? Most of the Old English, well, take that back. All of the Old English we will read in class is in what's called the Late West Saxon dialect. It's kind of the classical dialect of Old English. There's a lot of material that survives in other dialects. Survives in the Northumbrian dialect, for example, and in Kentish. Okay, it's more difficult to read. There's pretty good evidence that Beowulf preserves a variety of dialectal influences, which might indicate the text kind of moved around and was copied in multiple places. Right? And then you have this Alemannish about 1000 AD. But you can see similarities. Okay? Ata, notice all that's missing is the initial Ata, father, fader, fater, okay? Unsar, usa, ure, sorry, and then unser, etc. Okay? So you see the different dialects there. This is a map. These notes are on the D2L website, by the way. This is a genealogical tree of the major Indo-European languages. Notice I've got them divided into these two main branches, and then this is, if we were looking at those maps again, this is kind of the eastern portion. If you were to draw a line from, say, Finland down to Greece, pretty much, okay, you could say everything east of that is a Sottom language. Everything west of that is a Kintu. Why? Because all of these languages In the word for 100, they begin with either a s or sh. Okay? The Kintum languages all begin with a k or h sound. Grimm's Law explains why German has the h instead of the k sound. Right? So, what I want to get to is this map or chart. So, Proto-Indo-European leads to Proto-Germanic by Proto because we don't have any written record at this point of these. Okay? Proto-Germanic then divides into, you could say, East Proto-Germanic, North Proto-Germanic, and West Proto-Germanic. Okay? The East branch gives us two main groups, Gothic and Vandalic Burgundian. Okay? Gothic then gives us two forms, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths, both of whom invaded Rome. Okay? Vandalic and Burgundian survive only in a few laws and personal names. But if you've ever heard Wagner's Ring Cycle, okay, or read the poetry that it is based upon, some of the characters in Wagner, for example, Gunther, Hagen, Siegfried, they're these guys. They're the Vandals and Burgundians that are being referred to. Okay? So that's the East branch. The North branch leads to what is kind of generically called Old Norse, or sometimes Old Icelandic. Okay? But it's not only spoken in Iceland, it's also spoken in Denmark and Sweden and Norway. So that divides into two branches, West Norse and East Norse. East Norse is really easy, Danish and Swedish. Okay? What runs down the peninsula between between Norway and Sweden? There's a mountain range that separates the two. Okay? So that separates Swedish from Norwegian. Okay? Norwegian gives us, the West Norse gives us Icelandic, Faroese, etc. Why? Because it was the Norwegians that settled Iceland. It was the Norwegians that settled the Faroe Islands. It was the Norwegians that went to Iceland, and then to Greenland, and then to Newfoundland, long before Christopher Columbus. I mean, we have archaeological evidence that shows the Icelanders reached Newfoundland, Canada in around 1100.
And then they were like, we don't like this.
It was cold, and
There were already people there.
the natives weren't nice. And, I mean, they had a settlement for 20 or 30 years.
There was a great quote by Oscar Wilde that said that the Vikings found America and had the good sense to leave it again.
Sounds like Oscar Wilde. Okay. So then the West Branch gives us Anglo-Frisian and Netherlandic German. Okay, Anglo-Frisian, English and Frisian. What's meant by Frisian? Well, Frisian is the language spoken on the northwest coast of Europe. If you had a map of Europe up here,
So like Dutch and Flemish?
modern, yeah. Let me go back up to this. Right here, along this line, okay, are the islands of Friesland. Okay, Old Frisian is where that the language that was spoken there. And probably when the Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes came over, okay, they're coming from Denmark and northern Germany. What they do is they don't just hop a boat and come straight across the North Sea. They kind of hopscotch along the coast. And then go across from here to over here, where it's a much less dangerous voyage. Okay? Old Frisian is the closest of these old languages to Old English. If you can read Old English, you can pick up a text in Old English and kind of parse your way through, because you'll see similarities, which is why if you learn English, if you learn English well, it's not hard to pick up German. English, modern English. Okay? It's not hard to pick up German. It's a lot harder to pick up Italian. Why? One's a Romance language, one's a Germanic language. Okay? It's not hard to pick up Dutch. If you know Old English, German is a lot easier. Because Old English is kind of closer to German than modern English is. Because modern English underwent quite a few changes that German stopped going through around 1600. Okay? So, Netherlandic German, you have two forms. High refers to geography. Mountainous, low, flat area. So this is Hochdeutsch, and this is Plattdeutsch. Flat German and High German. Okay? Yiddish and Modern Standard German. Why? Because this is what Martin Luther spoke. And Martin Luther gave us Modern Standard German. How? By translating the Bible. He codified kind of the language in the Bible. Okay? So Low gives you Old Saxon, which leads to Modern Low German. Old Low Franconian, which gives you Dutch, Flemish. Afrikaans actually should probably descend from Dutch. Okay. You don't want to look at that. It's sound chart correspondences. So
Afrikaans, that's South African.
yeah, Boers. Okay. So you have Proto-Indo-European. The dot before means these are all reconstructed sounds. We don't see them anywhere. But where Proto-Indo-European, for example, had a p sound, Latin has a p. Okay? So, for example, the name for the sky father, Deus Pitar, in Proto-Indo-European, becomes in Latin, yeah, and then it gets combined together to Jupiter. That's who Jupiter is, the sky god. Okay, Zeus is the Deus. Okay, so P becomes P, but notice in Germanic it becomes Y, because what is father in Latin? Not there. Okay, but it's father. Well, 19th century German philologist named Jacob Grimm, Grimm's fairy tales. He and his brother collected the fairy tales, but Grimm also worked on a comparative Germanic grammar, okay, called the Deutsche Grammatik. And in it, he came across and noticed these similarities, and he formulated what's called Grimm's Law, that accounts for certain sound changes between Proto-Indo-European, Latin, Greek, etc., and the Germanic languages. So, for example, notice here you have a t, and here you have a th. So, Latin trace, English 3. Okay, Latin dens, English tooth. Okay, Latin pa, ped, pod, English foot. Okay, Latin k, English or German huh. So kaput, head. Okay, and even the T and the D correspond via another sound law called Werner's sound law. Okay? We can go into this if you want, but I don't really want to, because it's a different class entirely. What am I looking for? Okay, lights are going to come on. It's going to go off. Okay, so now let's go back to our dance. Okay, so you got the Indo-Europeans living in this little area around 6,000 BC. By 4,000 BC, they start to spread. By about 1,000 BC, we'll take that back. By 2,000 BC, we've got tribes. We've got the Germanic peoples. Why? Because the Homeric epics are talking about events that occur around 1500 BC. Okay? So, 55 BC, JC is Julius Caesar. It's not Jesus Christ. Julius Caesar. He is pre-existent, but he's not Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar invades Britain. Why? Because it's there.
Partially.
Yeah, right, yeah, a little bit.
Caesar's
It's what they do.
What does Britain have?
10.
10.
And people.
Not a lot,
Not
actually.
a lot, but I mean,
And Rome is, notwithstanding popular portrayal, Rome is not that big on slaves. On taking, native populations and transporting them to Rome, for example. What else does Britain have at this time? Oak trees. Massive oak trees, which can be used to build Roman galleys. Rome is a navy, or has a strong navy. But he doesn't immediately win. Caesar dies, and Claudius, 44 is when Caesar's killed. 43 BC is when Claudius annexes Britain. That is, the native Britons, Celts, is another way of understanding them, are subdued. And Britain is now annexed as another province of Rome. Okay? So it's at this time we start to see Roman garrisons stationed throughout Britain. I gotta consciously make myself say Britain, not England, because it's not England for a long time. Okay? So between 43 BC and 410 AD, what's going on in Britain? Any guesses?
Sorry, between what dates?
43 and 410.
The Roman legions are sort of hanging out there. They're dealing with, the Roman Empire is falling slowly.
Well, yeah, that begins here.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't put this up, but in the year 120 or around there, a guy built a wall. It's a huge wall. It's a great wall. It's a beautiful wall.
Constantine happened somewhere in there.
Yeah, Constantine's a little bit later. He's 300.
There are raids by.
Okay. Let's stop with here for a moment. Why does Hadrian build his wall? To keep the Picts out. The Picts are Scotland. Okay. He wants to keep them out because
They're not Roman. They're hard to control.
they're not Roman.
they're not submitting.
They're not submitting, and they haven't defeated them.
And they're awesome.
Yeah, Rome can't defeat the Picts. Just like Rome could never defeat the Germanic tribes. Rome got as far as the Rhine. And there was a huge battle. 90 AD, I think it was, something like that. Against the Germans. And the Germans lost the battle, but Rome never went farther north than this battle. Okay? Because they couldn't. What Rome finally did was they figured, okay, these German warriors are fantastic warriors. Let's buy them. They hired them as mercenaries. Okay? So word starts to spread. German soldiers make good mercenaries. So Hadrian builds the wall to keep the Picts out. This isn't Donald Trump's wall. Okay?
Because it's real.
This is a massive wall. Okay? We're talking in spots 30 feet wide. Okay? So there are storehouses in the wall. You can visit most of it. Most of it still remains. Okay, so Hadrian builds that around 120.
Does the Antine Wall come before or after that?
Not sure. And then in 410 AD, what happens? Not in Britain.
There's a okay.
Rome.
Rome starts to collapse.
Yeah, I mean
It's
Rome.
not start to collapse.
There's crazy people in Rome, and Rome is on fire.
Yeah.
Like, it's not good.
Rome is sacked. It's sacked. It's overrun by the barbarians, by the Huns. Right?
So not surprisingly, they decide to bring the legions back.
Exactly. So the emperor polls. You mentioned Constantine. If you want to throw in Constantine, 312. Constantine makes Christianity the legal religion. Christianity's already in Britain. Christianity's in Britain, we know, by the end of the 1st century. How do we know? Because you can go to the British Museum today, okay, and you can see mosaics that have been taken from villas throughout various parts of Britain, dating from the early 2nd century. Now, they're building villas with these big Christian mosaics, images of Christ. Okay, then you know Christianity's been around for a while. It's not like, hey, we got this new God. Let's build a big old house with imagery of him, etc. So Christianity's probably, according to the traditions of the church, Christianity's in Britain by the end of the 1st century. Joseph of Arimathea.
And other people at
For example.
Canterbury who claim that there was a church there in 47
Yeah,
AD.
Joseph of Arimathea. Okay, and Glastonbury also is where it's supposed to be where Joseph came. Okay, so
What, is that supposed to be 47 BC or 43 BC or 43 AD?
no, this is BC.
Okay, that's BC. That's
The annexing. Okay, so 410, Rome is sacked. The Roman legions are withdrawn, not just from Britain. This is from all the provinces to come in and defend Rome. Okay, so what happens when the Roman legions leave?
Everyone in Britain is like, yay!
that was
Well,
their
okay,
entire fighting force.
Everybody's like,
Everybody
somebody
else
else comes in.
Yeah.
exactly. Why? Because it creates a vacuum. It creates a power vacuum. Okay, the Britons, who have been living with the Romans now for nearly 5 centuries, okay, they're not living separately. There is no segregation going on.
No one's looking at Arcturus and being like,
Yeah, I mean,
you're
in Britain at this
both?
time,
What?
they've been intermarrying, the Romans have, with the British for several centuries. Okay? Legions leave, there's now no soldiers left. Because the British, the Romano-British people, by this time, are well pacified. They're not members of the Roman legions. Okay? Roman legions and legionnaires kind of come in and go out. They rotate in and out. They don't necessarily go in and stay for 20 years. Some did, centurions, okay, would come with their families, but you would have groups of legionnaires kind of move in and out and go to various parts of the empire and such. So the legions leave and they create this huge sucking sound. Well, what happens north of the wall? The pigs get restless and they start to come in.
Start sharpening knives.
So that Bede, who is the source for all this information we're going to be talking about, Bede tells us that then beginning in 449, 450, a Romano-British chieftain by the name of Vortigern,
That's a brilliant idea.
who's living in East Anglia, has the idea of sending an emissary off to Germania, to the Germanic tribes, for help. We will pay you if you will come help defend us. German tribes take him up, and they start to come over. And we get the influx of the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. Now, there's scholarly disagreement on what you call this event. Is it a, as newer texts call it, a migration,
Invasion.
or is it an invasion?
I guess it depends on which side of that you're on.
Migration's kind of nice. It's come on over, we got plenty of land, etc. Invasion is we're coming over and we're taking your land. Okay? It used to be argued entirely this was an invasion because of what happened to some, at least, of the Celtic-speaking people who still lived there. Okay? We know when the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came over, some people fled. They fled north into Scotland, they fled west into Wales, southwest into Cornwall, or across the channel into modern, say it, Catherine, Brittany. What's the E ending? It's diminutive, Little Britain. They founded kind of Little Britain there, okay, in northern France. Okay? That's where we get Breton lays from the Middle English period. Right? So that's kind of the older view. The problem is with that idea, we have very few discoverable or discovered battle sites where it's clear there was a pitched battle between Anglo-Saxon Jutes versus the native population. We do have other battle sites. I mean, we've got Roman battle sites against Celts, okay, because we see what the Romans did to them. We have Celtic battle sites against other people. Celts were known for lopping people's heads off and sticking them in walls and such. Okay, but within 100 years, Britain is Germanic. It's not England. You get the Saxons pretty much settling on the southern coast, what later gets called the Saxon Shore. Okay, you get the Angles pretty much settling. If you had a big map of England here, you'd have Scotland up here. You'd have Scotland up here, and you come down like this, and you get this big bulge. And then it goes in, and you get another bulge, and it comes over here, and Cornwall and such. All of this is today called East Anglia. Anglias, this is where the Angles settled. Okay? The Jutes settled in this one little area over here, today called Kent. Okay? Canterbury is where it comes from. And then the Saxons were pretty much all of this area except for Cornwall. Cornwall was still Celtic, Romano-Celtic, if you will. Okay? So that's beginning then. 597 AD, Pope Gregory the Great, Gregory the First, sends a Roman missionary to Britain.
Did you say 579?
597.
Oh, no. Okay.
I might have said 579. 597. He sends Augustine. This is Augustine of Canterbury, not Augustine of Hippo. Sends Augustine of Canterbury to Britain. He's not Augustine of Canterbury yet. He's actually from Tarsus, of all places, from Saul's hometown. He sends Augustine and a group of about 20 others. Augustine does not want to go. He really doesn't read the history about it. He does not want to go. And the Pope pretty much forces him to. Okay? And Augustine doesn't want to go because these are bloodthirsty pagan Germans at this point. But keep in mind, Christianity had been in Britain probably from 75 AD. Okay? And not just, in one area. Wales, right? East Anglia, Oxford, Southern Shore, Yorkshire, Scotland. There have been Christians all over. Okay?
Yeah, that's the thing I've always been curious about. When Rome left, did the church in Britain, were they just kind of de facto severed from the church on the continent?
No, because the church at the time wasn't necessarily Roman. It was largely Celtic.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily aligned with Rome. Keep in mind, the first 2 centuries of Christianity in Britain was not Roman because there wasn't a Roman church. Okay? Constantine declares Christianity the official religion in 312. 312 is the Edict of Milan. In 315, Constantine's not even Roman. Constantines Easter. He called himself Roman, but he lived in Constantinople, renamed the city after himself. Little issues of Trumpian, I can just see
everyone ready to live in
Trump
great,
DC.
no, think bigger. The United States of Trump.
So, he's sent because Gregory, again, this is from Bede. Gregory meets in a slave market in Rome 2 Anglian slaves, a boy and a girl.
I remember it well.
Blonde, blue-eyed, fair, tall, Aryans, Nordic type people. Dolph Lundgren and his twin. He meets them and he speaks to them through a translator. He asks them where they are from or who they are. They say, we are Angles. And he says, he puns on their name. No. You are Angelus. You are angels. He finds out they know nothing about angels or the source of angels or Christ or anything. And he decides at that point they need to learn the gospel. Okay? Keep in mind, at this point, he's talking to pagan Germans. Okay? He doesn't know about the church having been in England. And the pagan Germans probably looked at the church pretty much as ripe for spoil, looted, etc. But we don't think that it was entirely destroyed. Probably a lot of the members of the church were those who ran away, west, north, south, etc. We have churches that survive from those couple of those periods. There's one in Colchester. I didn't make it to this summer, but there's a church in Colchester, England, that dates from 400 AD. The church itself survives. Okay? So, Augustine goes reluctantly and converts the Germans. Not by himself. He's got, like I said, about 20 or 30 others with him. Bede gives us an account of the conversion of King Edwin of Northumbria in 616. Okay, this is 597. You can read about the conversion of Ethelbert of Kent. Real close to this, it's like 604, 605. Ethelbert's wife is already a Christian. She's the daughter of Clovis of France, who is Christian. Okay? So, she's probably over here whispering in his ear. And then comes Augustine. Ethelbert becomes a Christian, and people start becoming Christian very quickly thereafter. Bede's account is pretty important, which we'll talk about, I think when we get to it. Okay? Less than 100 years later, there's a church synod in Britain. It's not called England still. Okay? It's called the Synod of Whitby. Why Whitby? Whitby's on the northeast coast. Because...
Oh, this is the church in Ireland?
Yeah. Because Whitby is very near two monasteries, or the twin monastery of Wearmouth Yarrow, which in 660 was run by Abbess Hild, a very powerful woman. She was a daughter of royalty. She was royalty herself. She gave all that up. Bede tells us she lived the first 33 years of her life in secular fashion. Interpret that as you want. It just means she wasn't in the church, per se. But then she devotes the last 33 years of her life in the church. And she is made abbess of these twin monasteries. Okay? 664, they have the Synod of Whitby. The Synod is to determine which branch do we follow. Do we follow the branch of Christianity brought down from the north, for example, by Aidan of Iona, who comes to Lindisfarne in the early 7th century, okay, converts Cuthbert and others, not Cuthbert comes a little bit later, but Aidan coming from Iona, that is, who are his sources? Who are his fathers of the faith? Columba, Patrick. Yeah. So we're going back to the 4th and 5th centuries. Okay. This is the Celtic form of the church. And then you have the followers of Augustine, okay, who have Roman Christianity. Well, what do they have to decide? I mean, they worship the same Christ. They pray to the same Christ. They pray to the same saints. So what's the issue? The date of Easter.
Of course, it's always the date of Easter.
How do we celebrate Easter? When do we celebrate Easter? Okay? And what the Synod decides is we will follow Rome. Okay? What Aidan and the others were following at the time was an earlier form for dating, determining Easter than what was then current in Rome. Okay? So, the church became, quote unquote, one, let's say, became the Catholic Church in Britain at that time. 681 is when Hild dies. Okay? It's in his entry in the ecclesiastical history for Hild that Bede tells us the story of Cadman. We don't know exactly when Cadman lived. Some people, modern historians, will tell you Cadman never lived, that he's a myth. Okay? I don't think so, but believe what you want.
I mean, someone wrote the poetry, right?
Yeah. That, and in the story of Cadman, we find out how this shepherd or herder of some sort, we don't know that it's actually sheep, who is illiterate and who is advanced in years, one night has a vision, and in the vision a man says, Cadman, sing to me. He says, Lord, I can't sing. Cadman, sing to me. What shall I sing, Lord? Sing to me of creation. And boom, he bangs out Cadman's hymn. Okay? The interesting thing about Cadman's hymn is it's the first time in European vernacular languages that a native vernacular tongue and versification technique is used for Christian purposes. Hasn't happened before in Germany or Italy or France, okay, or Spain. Happens here, first of all. Okay, this is still 680. Germany hasn't even received any Christians yet. We're still 100 years, at least, okay, from Christianity going to Germany or Norway. Iceland doesn't become Christian until 1000 AD. Russia doesn't become Christian until 988. So 300 years, still long before that. Okay, 731, Bede publishes, per se, the ecclesiastical history of the English people, written in what language? Latin. All written in Latin. So when he gives us Cadman's hymn, he gives us Cadman's hymn in Latin.
Doesn't that kind of defeat
The entire purpose, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to criticize.
Yeah, but Bede actually, I mean, we'll talk about that passage that we did, but Bede says, this is only the sense, for it's not the original. In any translation, you lose the sense of the original meaning. Okay? That's Bede's little way of saying, so, learn Latin, folks, if you want to understand Latin. Learn Old English if you really want to understand Baylor. Okay? Or learn French if you want to read Baudelaire or whatever. Okay? 735 Bede dies. Okay? This whole period, let's say 680 to 800. That's the Dark Ages. The so-called Dark Ages. Okay? We have material culture that survives from this period that cannot be reproduced today. It is so fine. It is so specific. We don't have the craftspeople to do it in terms of jewelry making, metalwork, manuscript illumination. I mean, Lindisfarne Gospels, right in this period, 675 or so. Okay. And even the Lindisfarne, I mean, we can look at them, we can say how it's made, but we can't really understand how it's made. Okay, it's just amazing. About 50 years go by, and according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, now the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is begun by Alfred. Okay? But this, notice, predates Alfred by 100 years. So what's he doing? Is he, rewriting history? Well, kind of. By which I mean he's writing history. When Alfred takes the throne, he orders that a chronicle be made of English history, going back to its foundings. Okay? So the various versions of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle always begin with a genealogy. Whereas, Christ's history began in the Gospel of Matthew. Genealogy, okay? And some of those genealogies go back to God. So-and-so and so-and-so, who was the son of Adam, who was the son of God, kind of thing. It kind of helps, elevate your status as king if you can trace your lineage to God.
The creator of the universe.
Yeah. If you can create and rule the universe, this is my little portion of the universe. Right? So, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for the year 787 very cryptically says, in this year 3 longboats were seen.
Bum, bum, bum.
That's all it says in one of the versions. It's wrong. It wasn't the year 787. It was actually 793 that we know that occurred. That's the beginning of the Viking invasions. Okay? Which I would strongly recommend The Last Kingdom, available on Netflix. I would even more strongly recommend the books upon which it is based. Read all but the last 2. It seems like I stopped the penultimate one because Bernard Cornwell just really has a problem with the church. And some of his antagonism really, and he doesn't like Alfred. And I really like Alfred. But he doesn't like Alfred at all.
That comes through the show. That was one of the things that I
Yeah.
And every religious element on either side is just pathetic. Like, it's just.
But the Last Kingdom does a very good job of portraying, I think, Anglo-Saxon life during the time of the Vikings. And the Vikings are portrayed very well. I don't mean lovable. I mean they're accurately portrayed.
Sorry, real quick. How many longboats were seen?
3.
I saw 3 ships come sailing by. I think they raided my church.
How
How do you feel about Vikings? History Channel?
I haven't watched it.
What?
Yeah.
What? They get some things really, really, really right, and then a lot of other things.
I think it's some
Well,
stuff.
it's-
Mostly the Anglo-Saxon.
That's
thing.
the History Channel. It's it's kind of
Well, this is the History Channel explicitly doing fiction. So.
Yeah, I haven't found much available entertainment-wise that covers the Anglo-Saxon period that does it well. None of the Beowulf films.
What?
Though I'll admit, I had a doctoral student write a paper last time I taught the course on the modern adaptations of Beowulf. I disagreed with her, but it was a fantastically written paper. It was a well-argued paper. She received an A on the paper, and she got the Wolf Writing Award for the paper. Because a lot of it's about translation theory. Translation from text to visual image.
We all know that the most accurate portrayal of Beowulf was the one with Christophe Lambert. No. Christophe Lambert with the chainsaw swords. That's the only.
Okay, so the Vikings come and they start raiding. Right? But they don't just raid after a while, they settle. They start to intermarry with the native English population. Old Norse and Old English are close enough where they could probably, a native Old English speaker and a native Old Norse speaker could probably communicate in very halting fashion. Many of the words were the same, okay? Pronunciation would be different. A lot of Norse words have an R ending on them, and so the Anglo-Saxon would hear that and just have to remember to take that R off, kind of a thing. But they would be able to communicate probably, okay? Alfred becomes king in 871. He never should have been king. He had, I think, 4 older brothers, okay? And the guy before him, Aelred, had a son, Aelwold, who technically should have been king, but he wasn't up for the job. And the Last Kingdom portrays this rather well. He's a drunk and an idiot. Not a literal idiot, but he's pretty much a drunken college student kind of approach, let's say, right?
Henry V.
So,
A little bit.
oh, see, but yeah, Henry's doing something different there. Well, yeah, we could talk about him. Aelwald's a real idiot. Henry's pretending to be an idiot. Okay? So Alfred becomes king in 871. He has a hard slog for the first several years of his kingdom. Okay? In 878, however, Alfred and his forces come out from the marshes of Somerset, from the fens, essentially, and they surprise Guthrum the Dane and his much larger army. And he defeats Guthrum. Okay? Guthrum, by this time, is somewhat old. He's not infirm and feeble, however. He is still mighty and fearful. And at the Treaty of Wedmore, unfortunately, we have no idea where Wedmore is.
Aww.
It's completely lost to history. At the Treaty of Wedmore, Guthrum agrees to Alfred's terms. The terms are, you get essentially everything north of Watling Street, which is a town in London that runs up through kind of the middle of Britain up to about Chester. You get all of that, everything north of that. That becomes the Dane law. It's the area where Danish law holds sway. I retain everything south. And Guthrum must become a Christian with Alfred as his godfather. Okay. And Guthrum must promise never to attack England again. Even if other Danes come in, Guthrum can't join their forces. Okay.
I think it's interesting that Watling Street was the boundary because that's a Roman road.
Yeah.
That's still a relevant demarcation this lately.
Guthrum agrees to it. And from all historical sources, he completely honors the treaty. He never goes to war against Alfred or his descendants again. And he does become a Christian. And he apparently becomes a serious Christian. You have to keep in mind, Godfather at this point, it's not Marlon Brando with the cotton in the mouth, giving you a proposition. It means that Alfred himself is personally responsible for making sure Guthrum knows and follows the tenets of the faith. Okay? And he does. Alfred dies in 899. His son becomes king. His descendants then kind of push the Dane law back to the point that prior to 991, I think it's around 935, I can't remember exactly, 950, Athelstan, who is Alfred's, I want to say grandson, but I don't think he's his grandson. Athelstan. A-E. It means noble stone or princely stone. Alfred's name means elf-advised. Elf there might just mean supernaturally advised. I'm sure that's the way Alfred would have interpreted his name. If you want to read about Alfred, read, I used to require this, because I was required to read it when I took Old English. Asser's Life of Alfred the Great. Asser was a bishop. Not Alfred the bishop, Alfred the Great. Asser was a bishop who was a contemporary of Alfred's. In fact, what Cornwell kind of does here is he replaces this Welsh bishop by the name of Asser with a guy named Belka. Okay. Alfred had this bishop constantly with him. And the bishop wrote the life of Alfred the Great, just like Einhard wrote the life of Charlemagne about 100 years before Alfred. Okay? So, Athelstan, Alfred's son or grandson, I can't remember which, pushes the Danes back, and actually he defeats a battle. He defeats, in a battle of 5 armies, Tolkien reference there, he defeats 4 other armies. He defeats 2 Vikings, the Irish king and the Scottish king. Okay? The New Yorks. And becomes first king of all Britain. He's the first king of all English, okay? Which is essentially southern coast to pretty much the modern border between England and Scotland, okay? Excluding Wales. They could never defeat the Welsh. We can talk about that later. 991, Alfred's grandson, Athelred, or it might be his great-grandson, is on the throne. Okay? This guy is named Athelred, and then he gets an epithet, the Unred. Athelred means nobly advised, princely advised, Unread often gets translated in popular histories as the unready.
Oh.
It's not the unready. It's the you know, and read, you know, as advised. The ill-advised. We still use this word in modern English in one sense. One sense only. It's not pronounced read, it's pronounced read.
Unread.
Nope, sorry, just this part, the read part. If you were arrested, what must an officer do?
Read you your rights.
Read you your rights. They're not literally reading you your rights. They're advising you of your rights. It's the only way that word is used in the modern English and retaining its Anglo-Saxon etymology or origin. Okay? So Alfred's the king.
So wait, so his first name, his actual name means?
Princely advised, nobly advised.
Okay.
But then not.
But then
Yeah.
badly advised.
Yeah, he wasn't born with this part.
Right.
This part gets added. This part gets added because of what he does. In 991, okay, the Vikings are attacking again. Alfred pays tribute. Okay? Buys them off. Thinks he's buying them off. But at a place called Malden, just north and to the east of London, about an hour's drive away, a group of Vikings land. They sail up the Blackwater River, the Pant, as it's called, and they encounter an old alderman by the name of grizzled old, 45 probably, warrior, leader of the local feud, okay, and Beardnoth and his men are situated on an island in the middle of the river. The only way they could get to the island is when the tide goes out and the Vikings could walk across on a causeway that appears when the tide goes out. And the Vikings challenge Beardnoth according to the Old English poem that you'll be translating, the Battle of Malden. Okay? The Vikings challenge him, and Beardnoth, we're told, because of his overmode, agrees to let them cross. This word overmode is only used in conjunction with one other person in all Old English literature. All that survives. That other person is none other than Satan.
That is super badass.
Okay? Over, above, super, beyond, mode. Thought, mind, spirit. So, super thought, super mind, super spirit, super full of yourself means you're proud, arrogant. It's because of his overmode that he allows the Vikings to cross and the Vikings slaughter him. The English are entirely defeated. Okay? But it's in this poem that we get the greatest expression of the Germanic heroic ethos. Okay? When England is within 100 years of being decapitated, or Anglo-Saxon England is within 100 years of coming to an end. We get this expression of this Germanic heroic ethos at the end of the part of the poem that survives. Again, we'll talk about that when we get to it. 1014, two Vikings invade, two Norwegians, father and son team. Okay? The father is Svein Forkbeard. Probably because I told my wife I need to let my beard grow again. I just cut it like the day before class, the day that we started the semester, because it had been down about here. I'd usually come into class and I'd have my beard, down into forks, as it were. Okay? So Svein Forkbeard and his son Canute invade. Okay? In 1014. Alfred flees to France. He leaves his wife.
Nice. That's the ill-advised part, right?
Right? He leaves his wife. Svein Forkbeard dies. Canute becomes king. Okay? And marries Emma, Alfred's ex. It's from this union.
Oh no, I remember it.
It's from this union that we get William the Conqueror. more affectionately known by the Saxons as William the Bastard. Right? He's only called the Conqueror by the French. Okay? So Canute reigns until 1035 when he dies. Then his son reigns, whose name I can't remember. He reigns for 7 years. He dies. Okay? So, Norwegian's dead off the throne. Ethelred's eldest son, Edward, comes back from France, takes the throne. The C part is he gets a nickname also, the Confessor. Why? Because although Edward is married, he's apparently so holy he never consummates his marriage,
Yeah, that's
according to the Anglo-Saxons. Yeah, there's another story there too. Okay? So, Edward is king from 1042 to 1066. Sometime in the mid-1050s, when Edward still does not have an heir, Harold Godwinson, one of the most powerful men in the country, a young man at this point, the son of the most powerful man, other than the king, okay, Godwin. Harold is captured by William of Normandy. And William forces Harold to swear an oath that when Edward the Confessor dies, he, Harold Godwinson, will not challenge William's claim to the throne. Again, because William has a claim because he is a descendant of Emma, okay, Ethelred's first wife. Okay? And this story is told us on the Bayeux Tapestry, which is a big tapestry woven after the Norman conquest by English weavers, probably, in Bayeux, France. Okay? It's 240 feet long and it's 18 inches high. It's actually embroidery. It's a single piece of cloth. It's not sections sewn together. Single piece of cloth. Okay? And in one of the panels of the Bayeux Tapestry, which gives us imagery, but then it has Latin text above and below. In one of the panels, you see two men sitting on either end of a table. And the text above says, Harold swears to William. Beneath them, on the stretchers that connect the legs of the table, is a gospel book. Meaning, Harold swore on a Bible. Okay? So, it becomes an oath at that point. 1066 comes, literally, first day, January 1st, Edward the Confessor dies. 3 days later, the Witan, which is the king's close council of advisors, the most powerful men beside the king, elect Harold Godwinson the king. Okay. Harold has an older brother named Tostig. Tostig. It literally means heady. He's full of himself.
That's the name he was born with?
Yes, Tostig.
That's extremely unfortunate.
It's a good German name. Okay? So he's put out by this, that his younger brother was named king instead of him. So he leaves England and he goes off to Norway. He's going to rabble-rouse the king of Norway to come invade. Okay? So, Tostig goes off to Norway, where he hooks up with, not in the modern parlance, please, with Harald Hardrada. Okay? Harald Hardrada, which kind of means, use modern colloquial language, Harold Badass. This is not a guy you want. It literally means hard deeds. Okay? You don't want to mess with him. Right? Word also reaches William of Normandy in around March that Edward died, Godwinson is now king. William's not happy, so he starts constructing a navy. He's going to invade. Takes him a long time to construct this navy. Right. September rolls around. What time of year is it?
Fall.
What's going on out in the fields and such?
Rain.
Harvest.
Harvest. Okay? And Tosti and Harald Hardrada land in northern England. So Harold Godwinson receives word, so he has to march north to confront this army, this foreign army. He doesn't have a standing army. He has his own personal, what are called housecarls, his retainers. Think of them as the Secret Service. Okay? These are battle-tested warriors. He's got them, but he doesn't have a standing army. So he has to do what's called raise the feared. Raise an army from London to Stamford Bridge. It's about 180 miles. And he has to march. Okay? He on horseback, most of the men on foot. So he raises the feared going from London to Stamford Bridge, which is, I want to say it's near the Humber River. It's about 180 miles north. Okay? So he raises an army for that battle. It's for that battle alone. Right? He defeats Tosti and Harald Hardrada. They're both killed. Okay? While there, word reaches him, William of Normandy has landed on the coast of Pevensey, the southern coast, okay? Which is another 80 miles south of London. So now he's got to march 250 miles to take on another army. But he now has to raise a new feared also. Because all the farmers that he got to fight in the first battle, they've got to go back to their farms. Because if they don't bring in their crops, they starve. Exactly. Okay? So, Harold marches back south. Okay? Takes a little over 2 weeks. Marches back south. Meets William of Normandy. Not literally at Hastings. It's 5 miles away from Hastings. It's at the little town that is today called, well, it wasn't a town then, it was nothing then. At the place that is today the town of Battle, okay, where they fight. And a town arises over the place, okay. It's called the Battle of Hastings.
It's a subtle name.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
like
kind
just
of
sort of just.
So, about 5 miles from Hastings, battle occurs on October 14th, 1066. Harold Godwinson dies, according to the Bio Tapestry, from an arrow through the eye.
Yeah.
He's looking up and...
Wasn't it like 5 seconds into the battle, too? Like, it wasn't even...
No, I don't think
Or
so.
am I thinking somebody else?
You're thinking somebody else, yeah. This was the battle rage for most of the day.
Oh,
It occurred essentially in 3 waves. Okay? Yeah, we'll go ahead and do this.
if I remember correctly, I was reading about this. I think you might be thinking because at one point they said that he had died, like early on in the battle, and then
That's
there was a
probably what I was
retreat,
thinking
and then he had to go around and like take his helmet off and be like, "I'm not dead.
Yeah.
Go back."
William did something very strange. He didn't do what all military leaders say to do, which is take the high ground. Make the other guy run uphill. Because you can throw stuff downhill. You know, and you get tired running uphill if you're loaded with armor and such. So even though Harold has to march 250 miles, the French stay down here. The English arrive, they're up here. Okay? If you go to battle today, it no longer looks like this. It looks kind of like, it's not even that steep anymore. It's like this. Okay? Because it's something William had done after the battle. So they get there, and the French forces are down here, and the English forces are up here. So now let's look at it this way. Let's say this is the bluff. Okay? The English are up here. And the French are essentially like this. But the English don't see these French because they're hidden behind trees. All they see are these French, and these French attack. They're cavalry in the front with infantry behind. They attack, and the English shield wall holds. Now, this is one of the really good things about The Last Kingdom, is they give you an example of what a Viking shield wall, and the English learned from the Vikings how to make a shield wall, how a shield wall works. You get the shields to interlock, okay, down low, and then a layer up here, and then a layer up here. You can't beat through that. The only way you can break a shield wall is if the shield wall itself breaks. If somebody moves out of position. Okay? So, the French attack. Keep in mind, it's like this. And you have the English shield wall. Okay? Right around Harold are his personal things. These are special forces, you know. The French attack, they're repulsed.
They're also throwing rocks at them at this point, aren't they?
They run away. That I don't remember. Okay? They run away. The battle goes on. The French attack again. They retreat. The French attack a third time. They retreat, and the English shield wall breaks. They run after them. And when they run after them, you get the hammer and anvil. Okay? And the English are decimated. Christmas Day, 1066, William the Conqueror / William the Bastard is crowned King of England. Why Christmas Day? Because Charlemagne did the same thing in the year 800. Well, he had himself crowned Holy Roman Emperor, a little bit better than King of England. Okay? Within 20 years, all the Anglo-Saxon nobility are dead. I mean, William has them hunted down and killed. You call it genocide if you want. It's not all the Anglo-Saxons, but all the aristocracy. Why? No challenge. No threat to the throne. Okay?
French like killing aristocracy.
And by the year 1135, okay, in the Peterborough manuscript version of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, we have our first entry that is datable Middle English. That is, you can look at the entry and compare it with an Old English entry from, say, 1035 and say, okay, there are recognizable differences in the language. Heavy use of conjunctions and prepositions, loss of inflections, things like that. Okay? So that's the broad kind of overview of this period that we're talking about. Most of the manuscripts, the sheet that I had around for you on the table, most of the manuscripts that we have are dated to approximately that period, 975 to 1025. Okay. At least the four major poetic codices are the Riccioli manuscript, the Noel Codex, the Junius manuscript, and the Exeter manuscript. They all date from right around 1000 AD. So they're written in kind of late West Saxon, the classical version of Old English. Think of late West Saxon as King James. Because the King James Bible is not written in colloquial English of the day. It is written in already in 1611 in old archaic form of English. It would be like for us, Tolkien's language in The Lord of the Rings. Nobody talks that way. Nobody talked that way in 1945, really. Okay? Tolkien was hearkening back, what? To kind of a more Edwardian, Victorian period. Okay? Choosing kind of an elevated form of language. That's what the scribes of the Anglo-Saxon manuscripts were also doing. Okay? In these four major ones, at least. All right, let me wake this up.